Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have a very interesting show. Well, aren't they always, you might be saying. But today we're looking at Bizstats, which is a valuation software and database that's backed by AIBB, the Australian Institute of Business Brokers. And today, to talk about Bizstats, we have on the show Richard Hemingway from Mandanex Capital. Now, just to give a little quick background of Richard, even though he's not talking about his business today, but that doesn't stop me talking about it. Richard has over 30 years of business experience in CFO roles in large listed corporates, living and working throughout Australia, Asia, and New Zealand. And he's been involved in the valuation, the acquisition, the divestments, and the post-acquisition integration of businesses ranging from major corporates to small family-owned companies. And so that gives him a rich background from which to talk about Bizstats, which is all about statistics in relation to business sales activity across Australia in the SME sector. Richard established the Mandanex Group just over 5 years ago, and the group's guiding philosophy is facilitating cross-border business in the middle market. And at the moment, it has operations in Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Singapore, and representatives or partners in India, Southern Africa, Germany, and the US. And he does a lot of work in business valuation, capital raisings, M&A, and corporate advisory. And so he brings a wealth of experience in talking about this concept of business valuations and why it's so useful for, software and tools like Bizstats to be around gathering data. So without further ado, let's bring Richard onto the show to talk all about Bizstats. Here we go. Richard, thank you very much for coming on to the Deal Room Podcast today.
Joanna, it's my pleasure.
Fabulous. All right, so let's just launch straight into it. How about we just kick it off with talking about what Bizstats is?
Yeah, thanks. Bizstats, Joanna, is a data collection portal for the Australian Institute of Business Brokers, the AIBB. It was started around about, or a bit less than 10 years ago by the AIBB and has developed over the years into probably Australia's most comprehensive database of private business sale transactions in the market. It carries a range of valuable and sort of important information for the brokerage community, and I'd say it's a member-only tool. And so a great reason to join the AIBB for any brokers out there who are thinking about whether they should or shouldn't be part of the AIBB. It's one of the very key benefits of membership. It has developed over the years and I'd say had a bit of a hiatus a number of years ago where contribution levels into the database kind of stalled. We have over the last 1 to 2 years had a strong push within the AIBB from the leadership of the AIBB to reignite the database and to encourage members to actively contribute their sales data. And happy to report that there's a real forward momentum within the database at the moment, and every month our member community is contributing sales. I'd have to say not every member and every sale, but as I say, there's good, strong forward momentum in the database at the moment. So
that's brilliant.
Any members, any brokers out there in the brokerage community who are thinking of joining, please do so.
So obviously, as you said, it's Australia's most comprehensive database of business sale data. So what are some of those data points that are collected in the Bizstats data set?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joanna. And we might talk a little bit later about, how quick and easy it is for the brokerage community to contribute their data, because it's, I think, around about 8 data points for each sale. So we capture information on the business type and location. I would say that it's an anonymous contribution, and so both brokers, in terms of not, quite rightly, not necessarily wanting their individual profiles to be highlighted through the Bizstats database. The contributions are anonymous, both from identifying the broker involved as well as identifying the business itself, of course. And so confidentiality is a real key within the data contribution. So it's business location and type. And various key KPIs, if you like, against each sale. So it will be sales revenue, gross profit, PBITDA. Let me talk about that for a second. So it's the normalised view of profit that brokers will typically use in terms of appraising the value of a business is based on PBITDA, which is the earnings before proprietors' drawings and wages, interest, tax, depreciation and amortisation. You can tell I'm a chartered accountant by that.
I was getting that feeling. Yes.
But so it captures PBITDA, and then obviously that is information about the business itself, and then it switches over to information about the sale transaction. So the value of the sale, which is broken down into tangible assets, or plant and equipment sort of thing, stock and goodwill to be the total composition of the sales price. So the key data points that will allow brokers, as they're appraising businesses or valuers as they're valuing them, to get a sense for the sorts of multiples that our businesses are being traded at.
Yeah, that's great. And I can imagine it's particularly useful. I mean, useful for anyone who's not part of a very large team to ensure they're staying on top of understanding where the market is. And particularly, I guess, if they're dealing across industries as well, to get a feeling for, something that might be in an industry that they don't normally deal in, perhaps.
Absolute good spread of industry data within the database, as you would expect, just by sheer volume of numbers. Significant percentage of the sales in there relate to sort of hospitality and those sorts of businesses, but there's a good representation across most industries within the database. Interestingly, as you say, where someone is operating in a larger team, I'd sort of argue that it's nonetheless really interesting then for those people to be able to both contribute their data and draw on data that other brokers are also seeing transactions done out in the market.
Absolutely. And so, look, that's a really good point. Why don't we really drill into what the benefits are to brokers? So you've made a really good point here. It's not just for, the smaller brokerage firms, it's also for the larger ones. So let's drill into what the benefits are, because maybe this is something that is really useful to dig into. So,
look, there's a range of benefits, Joanna, in terms of the industry as a whole actively and the membership in particular of the AIB participating in contributing as much of their data as is possible into the database. As a precursor to that, from a regulatory point of view, it's a little bit different state to state across Australia, but basically the international valuation standards, which have come into force as of January this year, make it mandatory for those performing valuation work, which would typically include appraisal work, to take note of and use market data where that is available and comparable. That is underpinned or echoed by the various state regulations, and I have one on my screen here. For example, the WA Real Estate and Business Agents Code makes it mandatory for people providing appraisals of market value. If available information regarding the sale of similar businesses must support the opinion of value. So that's basically a common theme. So we kind of have to do this, but there's reasons beyond that to do it as well, Joanna. One is that it protects clients. We all value our clients and want to provide the best level of service for them. And I wanted to talk also about professionalism within the brokerage industry. Providing accurate market appraisals to clients is a very important part of the industry maintaining those standards. For our clients, providing realistic and not false expectations, either on the high or low side of where they should expect the value of their business to sit in the market is a very sort of key pillar to that. The more data there is for brokers generally to draw on, the better those opinions of value can be. The standards, the international valuation standards, and anyone who's learnt valuation will know that there are various sources of data that we, as we're doing valuations and appraisals, that we can draw on. The best source of information is where you yourself have direct and personal knowledge of comparable transactions in the market, and so some of the larger brokerages probably have relatively ready access to that sort of information. But generally, then it tiers down from direct information to almost market rumour type of. And obviously, the weighting on direct information is far higher in terms of allowing a broker to understand special circumstances that have driven a sale to be at a previous sale to be at a certain value. Whereas within the Bizstats database, what we get is truly consistent information that has been checked prior to being activated. So the process within sort of contributing data is that a broker will go in and put their information in, and myself or one of my colleagues in at the Bizstats will check that information and ask questions back to the contributing member prior to that becoming a live sale that's accessible. It's really important, and in terms of what multiple of profit a business may have transacted at. Any of us who've done this for any period of time will understand that there's profit and that number can vary wildly depending on what's included and excluded in that figure.
So what you're saying is here, these points of quality assurance, I guess, through the collection of the data and before it is displayed in the Bizstats data set, that there are actually people here who are cross-checking the information that's come in to ensure that whoever's inputting the information or providing the information is properly understood and is providing the data in accordance with the rest of the data that's being collected.
Well summarised, absolutely. And when you're looking at Bizstats, you know that PBITDA is PBITDA and not some other number, and that's really important.
I think that's super important because, as you say, there's many different ways of looking at profit, and, the figures themselves become a bit useless if there's not a standardisation. So obviously the benefit of this sort of process is the standardisation that you're applying to the data as it's coming in as well. And
look, one other benefit in there, Joanna, and this is in a sense a little bit of a selfish benefit around the broker community, is it acts as some level of protection of income, if you like, if I can put it that way. It keeps brokers, where there's a body of data that demonstrates that the right value for a business is a certain level, then it's difficult to launch an argument that says that we should be telling our client that it's a significantly different value to that. What that means is that as we brokers are marketing businesses, we're doing it at a realistic and right level for our clients, that the expectations are set correctly, and that will lead to more sales, if you like. That benefits both clients, but also benefits brokers in as much as you won't be soldiering away on an unrealistic value expectation.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting point as well, isn't it? Because I hear brokers talk a lot about, the difficulty in the market of dealing with, a potential client, so a seller, giving them what their belief is about the market value or the likely market value of the business, and having difficulty with perhaps others in the market coming up with a much higher viewpoint and therefore taking, the listing. I guess something like Bizstats gives a broker an ability to point to the independence of the information that they're providing or the appraisals that they're providing for a business to help deal with that situation where maybe there might be suggestions that there might be, marketing that's a little bit misleading or deceptive, perhaps.
Yeah, I possibly wouldn't pick those last two words, but yes, no, absolutely. And when you're out in the market and you are able to produce for your potential client a body of evidence that, as I say, has been checked, that demonstrates that not dissimilar businesses are trading at a certain level than if they're being given an entirely different expectation on the low or the high side by another participant in the market, then you would expect most clients go back and challenge the other participant to try and produce such, evidence to support that. So it's, look, there can be I can't see any downside in just building this database to the best it possibly can be.
Yeah. So, and then I guess the flip side of that is also ensuring that you have a wide level of contributions spread, geographically across industries, as we've been talking about. And one of the things that I guess we should reiterate, because I thought it was an important point when you mentioned it, is the ability for anonymity when contributing data. So really there's no downside to contributing data. You're contributing to the greater good and then, having the ability to use that broader data set yourself. But just coming back to it, obviously, when brokers providing the data, there's nothing that identifies them and the transaction as a whole. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Within the couple of us who check the data as it's going in the back end of the system at the administrator level, there is the ability, and because we need to be able to ask questions of the contributing broker. So within that level of the database, there is, but to anybody using the database, no, the contributing broker is blind, is anonymous, and even at the admin level, the identity of the business in question is not ever made available, nor should it be. There's some real privacy reasons.
Of course, absolutely.
And so it's we monitor that very, very closely.
Okay, fabulous. And so then maybe if we can just take a little moment to look globally at what is happening with similar databases. Maybe if you can talk about that for us, what's happening globally. Are there similar databases globally?
It's an interesting thing, Joanna. So Bizstats here in Australia has been going, as I think I mentioned earlier, sort of close to 10 years now. There is a similar database in the US, which I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's been going roughly a similar amount of time, and one in New Zealand that I'm aware of, also named Bizstats, which has been going for a similar amount of time. So here in Australia, we're certainly not the only market that has recognised the need for the brokerage community to have access to data in order to properly work for their clients. So those two international databases gain strong industry support, which is great. And further afield, other jurisdictions probably suffer a little bit from a lack of that sort of information. Most of the data within Bizstats here in Australia and those other comparable databases are at the sort of the SME sort of level. There's a couple of databases which seek to capture larger mid-market, truly mid-market type transactions, such as the US PitchBook database, which will catch both publicly traded and private data for mid-market transactions, and there's a range of those sorts of databases out there.
And so do you know any of the background of PitchBook in relation to how it is that it captures its data?
Well, not specifically, other than, the publicly traded information that it has, teams of researchers out there that are...
So scraping information, basically.
But there are also contributing members to that database, I believe. But again,
I guess that's one of the benefits, something like Bizstats that comes from, where the information comes from contributions as opposed to scraped data. Scraped data, I guess, sometimes can lose the context of, maybe other things that have happened in the transaction. And one would think the data checking processes that are going on with Bizstats in the contributed data, where you're able to cross-check against data that's been provided, must result in a high level of quality.
Yeah, sorry to talk over. Yeah, absolutely right. Look, that's right. And it's very important to understand that the public, any listed companies that are executing sort of M&A transactions, you'll see in any public company's annual report where they've acquired a privately held entity as part of their group, the details of that transaction will be disclosed within their published accounts. And so that sort of information is relatively easy and easy to discern and accurate because of the processes that sit around the sort of public company disclosures. However, most transactions are between private and private.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to say. It's fine where you've got that, the involvement of a listed entity. But if you don't, then, I guess the problem is, and, the issue is that acquisitions by listed entities aren't necessarily going to provide the same results in multiples of acquisition that, privately held companies between themselves will be trading at, So I just wonder.
Good point. Often public company acquisitions have synergistic benefits, which would, in valuation terms, put them in a multiple range that may attract a sort of a special circumstance, which might increase the multiple beyond what a value would see the multiple as. Comparability is certainly an issue, and as transactions reduce in value, in a sense, they become harder to track. There would be a range of sort of mid-market transactions, even between private companies that get announced publicly, not in granular detail, but as the value of those transactions become less, then the contribution by the brokerage community to databases such as Bizstats becomes more and more important.
Yeah.
Communally protecting our clients' interests.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we've really covered some of the most important areas that I thought would be interesting to understand with Bizstats. We've talked a bit about the background, the reasons for contribution, the framework that they sit into. Are there any other areas, Richard, that you think it's important for us to be conveying to our listeners here?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just talking for a couple of minutes about the perceived obstacles as to why, because the brokerage community may not contribute data, and the first of them is something that each and every one of us know very well, and that's the fact that there simply aren't enough hours in the day. I'm not sure who thought that there should only be 24 hours in a day, but
I'm with you there, Richard. Oh my goodness, I'm so with you.
Look, and I'd say what we've worked very hard and within the AIBB and the Bizstats area to make sure that we've really thought through the minimum necessary number of data points that need to be captured for the database to be meaningful and provide good information back. And as I enter a sale into the database, it may take you a little bit longer for your first couple of sales that you enter because, as with anything in life, you kind of get your eye in and get into the zone of doing it. But if you've got your sales data with you, you're logged into the database, it should take you less than 5 minutes to enter a sale.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's easy. Come on. Who cannot afford 5 minutes?
As I'm sure the first time a broker tries to do it, it will take them probably significantly longer than that. But I assure you that once you've got into the zone of doing it and you'll organise yourself to have the key information available, and it should not take longer than that. We've also created a spreadsheet for those who would prefer. You can either enter it directly through your login to the database as a member of the AIBB, or you can enter it on a data entry spreadsheet. Either way, it takes about the same amount of time. The other reason, I guess, is perceived some level of sacrificing competitive advantage by contributing your data. You may either be a niche broker who operates in one particular sort of industry vertical, or you might be a larger broker who has a range of data internally available to them. I definitely argue in either case that it's probably a fallacy to think that is an area of competitive advantage for you. It seems to be in everyone's interest, as we've discussed, for Bizstats to become as comprehensive a picture of the private sales, business sales market within Australia. I don't believe that, for example, let's take the example of a niche broker who operates in, one particular industry. Your competitive advantage is the fact that you've worked for years to know who's who in that industry, to develop a network of contacts, on the buyer and seller side, where you can bring true value add to your clients and potential clients. Those 8 to 10 data points contributed anonymously to an overall major database simply aren't your competitive advantage in the marketplace. And in fact, I'd I'd argue the opposite, that where you have a new broker coming along wanting to break into a space that you operate in, the risk by not contributing data in that area is that you allow that new broker to, in a sense, not make up a value, that would be wrong of me to say that, but to, healthily appraise the value of a business in the absence of having cold hard data that shows that shouldn't be the value of the business. They will be able to maintain that argument and potentially win clients as a result. So I'd argue very strongly that it's in everybody's interest, no matter what your circumstance, to be a member of the AIBB and to be a contributor to Bizstats.
Okay, absolutely love it. Well, Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show today to talk all about Bizstats. I thought it was really interesting, hopefully very interesting to our listeners out there. So if our listeners want to get involved by being a contributor and also in then using the data out of Bizstats, what's the message? Join AIBB. I think that's the message. Is that right?
Join AIBB, and any current members of AIBB who listen to the podcast, and this has acted as a memory jogger for them to start contribute their next sale, then happy for anyone to contact me directly or to go via the AIBB, which is info@aibb.org.au.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. We'll put that link up on the site. And I just want to say an absolutely massive thank you, Richard. Thanks for coming on to the show.
That's a pleasure, Joanna. Look forward to talking again.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Deal Room podcast. All about, of course, the topic of Bizstats. Now, if you'd like more information about this topic, then just head to our show notes or over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com. There you'll be able to download a transcript of this podcast episode if you would like to read it in more detail. And of course, we will link straight through to the AIBB where you can find out more about Bizstats, or if you're not a member, you can find out how to become a member. There you'll be able to also make contact with Richard if you'd like to pick his brains a little bit more about some of the benefits of getting onto this Bizstats bandwagon, being a contributor yourself and also getting access to the data that comes out of it. Well, thanks again for listening in. I hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if you did, don't forget to press that subscribe button. Well, thanks again. We will see you next week. You've been listening to Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.